Hi everybody, this is Lisa Haven and I've got some pretty imperative information that I just need to get out there to you guys. I have been studying on this for the past couple of days and there are some interesting ties that I really want to bring to you. And basically what I've been doing over these past few days is diving through Jade Helm and some other governmental documents, including some things on the RAND Corporation and in the NDAA, and I'm bringing together the links here for you that I find absolutely fascinating. So I want to encourage you first and foremost to listen to this video in its entirety because there's lots of new stuff in here, and it basically proves how close we really are to not only martial law, but FEMA camp roundups and what our government is currently doing and how that's exposed. But here's kind of a headline I'm going to give to you guys. It is the real agenda exposed, 100% proof it's not just going to be our military on our streets, but also an uptick in police activity. And I've got some interesting stuff there. Also, Obama task force for the 21st century has come out of the closet. And then I'm going to be getting into some ties between the Jade Helm document, which we know is an 8-week exercise program that's going to be happening in some of the southwestern states of the United States. It's also happening in Florida currently, along with the Presidential Task Force report that just surfaced last month. And I've read this entire report. I'm going to show you some things on it. But both of these agendas have the same goal. One is military-based, one is police-based. And when you see the link in these documents, it's really it's just mind-boggling. But I'm going to also talk about the 1033 program on the NDAA and also get you some updates on some FEMA camp drills that are going on. So let's just dive right into this and cover as much as we can. Okay, so here's the first thing that I want to show you. It's an executive order that was just placed at the very, very end of last year, December 18th, 2014. And this is right around when we are all focused on Christmas. This is why you will find a lot of executive orders, unfortunately, are passed around holidays. So if it's a holiday, look for an executive order. Just a quick thing. But I wanted to bring this one up because it basically establishes a task force or a police task force of the 21st century. And it says, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the U.S., and in order to identify the best means to provide an effective partnership between law enforcement and local communities that reduces crime and increase trust. So he is establishing a task force or a police presidential task force that helps relationships between law enforcement and local communities. That is the goal of this executive order. And he says, Section 1, to establish it. President Task Force of 21st Century Policing. Number 2, membership. How many of our members they have. Third, their co-chairs or co-chairs. And their mission, the task force shall consist with applicable law, identify best practices, and otherwise make recommendations to President on how policing practices can promote effective crime reduction while building public trust. I want you to hone in on that because if you remember something from Jade Helm, this is also a goal of Jade Helm. It goes on to state here in Section 4 that they shall hold public meetings. 7 that I'm aware of, and this is federal, state, tribal, local officials, and even non-governmental organizations. And you're going to find out they work with everything from faith-based to non-faith-based. Okay, scrolling on down a little bit, and this is kind of the end of it here. After the task force has been put together, now the task force of this 21st century is just basically the think tank of everything that they want to accomplish with our local police departments and local PD. Here's what they want to entail and go through, and then whenever all their reports are done and these things can start to be implemented, then they terminate them. That's what Section 5 is about. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Section 6 is just the general provisions of how it all goes about. But that's it. That's where I want to start, because it is this executive order that led to, and let me take you there, this. The Presidential Task Force on 21st Century Policing. And as you can see, this was just completed March of 2015. This, again, was put together because of President Obama executive order. And the executive order is actually included in here. I believe if you scroll down to around page 89, I believe it's the scroll page. I'll just take you there real quick so you can see it for yourself. I don't like anyone to take my word for it, but here on page 83, we have the executive order here that I just talked to you about that references this is why this particular document was created. All right, back to the beginning. There we go. All right, so here's just a basic table of contents, some of the things, and here are basically the 6 pillars, with the 7th being implementation, and they get to a lot of detail in these particular pillars, which I'm going to just kind of brief on some of them so you get an overall idea of what's going on. Okay, now here's just an overall breakdown of what this is about. We wish to thank President Barack Hussein Obama for giving us the honor and privilege of leading the task force on the 21st century policing. The task force was created to strengthen community policing and trust among law enforcement officers and the communities they serve, especially in light of recent events around the country that have underscored the need for and importance of lasting collaborative relationships between the local police and the public. We found engaging with law enforcement officials, technical advisors, youth and community leaders, and non-government organizations through a transparent public process to be enlightening and rewarding. So that's kind of a breakdown of what it's about. And as you can see, the main goal of this entire report is basically that was created by President Obama, this panel of people created by him, is basically to gain the trust back of the local police departments with the community. That's what this is about, getting the communities more familiar with an uptick of police activity in their neighborhood. This is exactly what it is. They want more military out in the streets, not more military, more police out in the streets. They want more police interaction between communities, and this is exactly what this document is promoting. And they have already started implementing, which I'll show you direct references to this particular document of why they've implemented some stuff. But it also goes on to say here, I believe in this section, that the task force conducted 7 public listening sections across the country, and I'm going to dive through all 7 of those briefly, and received testimony and recommendations from a wide range of community and faith leaders. It means it's talking to not only people in the community, but we're talking people in the churches, pastors, things like that. And this just makes me think so much so of your FEMA pastors. And there are a lot of churches, sadly, working hand in hand with our government on FEMA drills and whatnot. And this is just, part of that. But they're also working with law enforcement officers, academies, and so on forth. So that kind of gives you an idea of who they work with. Okay, so moving on to basically introduction. There we are. And this is just a brief overview here. But the introduction basically tells us that the entire purpose, and I've said this already, of this document is to get the public to trust the police departments in the community. That's the goal. You guys can pause and read through that here. But I also want to quote one particular section I was like, ooh, on, and it's this right here. People are more likely to obey the law when they believe those who are enforcing it have the right, the legitimate authority, basically to tell them what to do. So the goal is to get us to the point where we will believe everything and anything for the most part of what we're being told by them. Building trust and legitimacy, therefore, is not just a policing issue. It involves all components of the criminal justice system and is inextricably bound to bedrock issues affecting the community, such as poverty, education, and public health. Now, with this in mind, What I'm going to do is take you to the Jade Helm document. Let's go there. Here we are. Now, this is a military conducted training. The police task force of the 21st century deals with police. So we have police whose goal it is in 2015 is to gain the public's trust. Then we also have Jade Helm, which is our military, our Air Force, our Marines, our Army, our Navy, all of them working together. And as it says in this document, to gain the public's trust. Let me take you to that page. And here this is on page 7, the opportunity to work with civilians to gain their trust and understanding of the issues. That is a link that does not need to be ignored. I see a link here where it's the goal of the military to get the public to trust them being on the streets in their military vehicles and all kinds of stuff. That's the goal of this document, or one of many, I should say, of Jade Helm here, is to get us to trust them. Then we have this, which I'm going over now. This is the interim report of the Presidential Task Force of the 21st century. And this entire document is to get us to trust police in our streets. I know you guys see the link here. They are doing a huge push in our government at both the state and federal levels with our military and our PDs to gain the trust of the people, to get the people familiar with more cop activity in the streets and more military activity in the streets. Not just the military that they're doing this with. According to this document, it is also going to be the police active on our streets way more than they have been. Let me show you a couple sections on that because I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to see it. All right, so in this document, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, these bold prints. These are the 7 basically sessions that were described and what they talked about. But I'm going to get into those in just a moment because it gets into more detail later. But here is the first overall recommendation to the president by this task force that he created. Here is the first overarching recommendation. The president should support and provide funding for the creation of a national crime and justice task force, an entire force to review and evaluate all components of the criminal justice system for the purpose of making recommendations to the country on comprehensive justice reform. So basically, they think our PDs need a huge readjustment. They need to be reformed, and that needs to have a national crime and joint task force to do this. So that's our first thing. The second recommendation is here, and that's basically, that one's, nothing wrong with it. I don't see anything. The president should promote programs that take a comprehensive and inclusive look at community-based initiatives and that address the core issues of education, health, safety, and poverty. So there's that. But here is the first session that they had, the building trust and legitimacy. Their main and number one goal, again, is to gain the public's trust. And they believe that they can do that through lots of different ways. There's going to be some recommendations on here I want to show you guys. Now, before I dive in deeper and further into this document, what I want to say is this. There is a lot of good stuff on this document that I actually agree should be implemented and done in our police departments and whatnot. Some of those things include, our police officers having cameras on their vehicles, cameras on their clothing. Other things include these officers, in the event that they do something wrong, that it's a mistreatment of somebody, it's reported to the media. These are good things. I'm all for it. So there is a lot of good stuff in this document that I'm like, heck yeah, this is great. They should do that at our local PDs. There's also things in there that I'm like, I'm not so sure about that one. But like I said, there's always a little poop in the pie, a little bit of poop in the pudding, however you want to put it. I know I say that often, but there's no better way to do that when reading through these documents. But I want to say I commend them for putting some good stuff in here that I think needs to be implemented. But there are some things that worries me, like, for example, the ties between building the trust right now in the Jade Helm military document with this police task force also having the same goal. That just tells me that they are preparing over the top for martial law. Will martial law be enacted? I don't know. Could it happen soon? I don't know. Could it be 10 years from now, 15 years from now? I don't know. All I know is I'm going to tell you when this stuff is happening, and you guys can make that conclusion. But all I know is there is definitely 100% preparation for that, and a big push to gain the trust of the public, both from the military aspect and the police aspect. So here we are, building trust and legitimacy. Now, first of all, it's made clear, and I actually skimmed past this, but I wanted to state this, but it is evident in this report that it will be talking about the justice system alone can't handle all the crime and stuff that is going on. So it says that they need to establish through partnerships across sectors at every level of government to be involved in this thing in order for our general safety. Remember, they do everything under a cloud of good, a cloud for the betterment of all. But here they're saying it cannot just be through your local police departments alone, but the government and the federal government and outside federal government partnerships. That's your FEMA churches. That's your all kinds of, groups and organizations that some of our schools, a lot of our schools, they have no choice working with this. So as you're going to see, according to this document, the local PD are going to have their hands in basically local businesses and schools and everything in order to get us used to them in the streets. But that's that. So pillar one, building trust and legitimacy. It says building trust and nurturing legitimacy on both sides of the police-citizen divide is not only the first pillar, like I said, but also the foundational principle of this entire report. And it establishes relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve. So moving on, that's basically what that is in a nutshell. Having good relations between people and them. But here is some of the recommendations. Basically, how does this task force say, okay, this is how we go about getting the police officers to have good relations and build trust with the community? One of their first recommendations is here. Law enforcement culture would embrace a guardian mindset to build public trust and legitimacy. Basically, redefine the policeman's role as guardian versus anything else. So kind of give them that guardian mentality. Scrolling down just a little bit here to page 10, I found this pretty awesome quote, and I have to say, I agree. I just wish they'd actually implement it, but they're not. And it says, and this was by task force member Susan Raw. She wrote, "Why are we training police officers like soldiers?" Amen. Although police officers wear uniforms and carry weapons, the similarity ends there, and it should. The missions and rules of engagement are completely different. The soldier's mission is that of a warrior to conquer. The rules of engagement are decided before the battle. The police officer's mission is that of a guardian to protect. The rules of engagement evolve as the incident unfolds. Soldiers must follow orders. Police officers must make independent decisions. Soldiers come into communities as an outside occupying force. So true. Guardians are members of the community, protecting them from within. And that is their rationalization to changing police officer into a guardian type of role. Now, I only wish that this was being implemented, because we know at the federal level, they passed the NDAA. And in the NDAA, there was a phrase in there called 1033. Let me just take you there. And here we are, the 1033 program. And basically what this does is grants permanent authority to the Secretary of Defense to transfer defense material to federal and state agencies for use in law enforcement. Basically, allowing our law enforcement to have military grade equipment. That's what this is about. This is why our local PDs now have MRAPs and the like. I did a post a while back where you can actually plug in your zip code and it will tell you what your local PD bought. My local PD in a town of less than, 80,000 people in my town, they bought 3 MRAPs just this year. or got 3 MRAPs given to them. I wasn't clear which it was. But based off this 1033 program right here, they are completely militarizing our local law enforcement. This is why we don't trust them. One reason, and they openly do it so. And here's some of a list of things that they're giving them. And this is down on page 2, but it says exercise equipment, generators, tents, law enforcement supplies, riot shields, holsters, binoculars, digital camera, and also night vision goggles. My department got tons of these. Vehicles, we're talking MRAP, military, civil riot kind of stuff. Watercrafts, aircrafts, and weapons. So basically anything they darn well want. Well, that completely contradicts this quote right here. Although it sounds good, unfortunately, it's going unheeded, because we know based off the 1033 program that that's the opposite of what's being done here. But back to this. All right, so moving on. Pillar 1 was building trust and legitimacy. Going on to pillar 2 is policy and oversight. This is basically the implementation of policies. That's kind of what this is on. And basically the only thing I found under this particular goal was here. It gets all into, make sure everybody's equal. There's no discrimination. Don't discriminate on race, ethnicity, origin, age, gender, sex, yada, 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 yada. They always got to throw that in there, and almost to the point where the gay and lesbian community kind of gets preferential treatment concerning sexual harassment. So if you don't want to be harassed by someone, just say, hey, I'm gay, and then they'll probably give you preferential treatment of some sort, which I find kind of interesting. But they're saying not to be, why don't they say that about everybody? I don't understand why they don't say, don't have misconduct toward, a Jew, or don't have misconduct toward a Christian, or don't have misconduct toward a Mormon, or whoever it is. But it's just here, as you can see, according to this action item here, concerning sexual harassment of LGBTQ. Just thought that was fascinating or interesting. Wanted to share it with you. Okay, moving on to goal number 3, technology and social media. Yay! We all love this one because it's so great that they get to monitor everything we do. Yay! Actually, I found some pretty crazy stuff in this, and I'm obviously meaning that sarcastically. Now, I said here's the good thing. Technology available to law enforcement today includes everything from body-worn cameras, that's your BWC, and I'm all for that, to unmanned aircraft. I'm not for that in our skies. We don't need that. And social media. I'm not for that anyway. I'm not for them going in our private media and saying, hey, this is what we look at and this is what it's for. And I've done tons of posts on Facebook, how Facebook talks to, or shares information with basically all aspects of our government. They don't all come out and say we share with the CIA or FBI. They don't say that, but they do it, especially if it's requested from them. They have to do that to a point. However, with the local law enforcement, it's open wide for them. And I want to show you on this on page, let me go to page 37. All right, here we are. And here's the question. What types of social media does your agency, asking about this police agency, currently use? And what types of media do you plan on using in the next 2 to 5 years? What do they use in order to collect information on you and me in regards to, let's gain a file on this person. Look at their website, 100. Obviously, it has to be because they use that. Facebook is number 2. 2. You don't think they're evil? I do. Yeah, I do. And there they are, 82%. That's a pretty hefty percentage. And who's in next place? Well, Twitter. It took me off of there. There we go. Twitter with 69%. Okay, that's pretty huge. And then we have YouTube, 48, LinkedIn, 34. So there we have Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn are your 4 highest sites that local PD get a file on you for. So there's the proof. Yet Facebook will stay till they're blue in the face. Oh, we don't share with your government or local PD. No, no, no. We don't do that. Oh, they're such liars. Yeah, like, we know that. But there's your proof. Anyway, so there's some of that as far as, what they're after. Anyhow, there's lots of recommendations on things that they need to do. Here is agencies should adopt model policies and best practices for technology-based communities to gain trust and access. The federal government, see how they work hand in hand with the federal government. This is like, let's the local PDs work with the federal government because it's showing, in their opinion, the incapabilities of our local law enforcement to do their job. They need daddy government, mama government to help them do their job. And it's just pathetic in my opinion, but there is that. So moving on to Pillar 4. Community policing and crime reduction. This is basically just how they should go about it. And here on page 43 down here is our first recommendation, or third. Basically, community policing should be infused through the culture and organizational structure of law enforcement agencies. In other words, they are making the recommendation to put police officers in all aspects of our lives. Let's put them in the community. Let's put them into, businesses and local places and community events and whatnot. Here's another one following 2 pages beyond that, 46. And remember, I've read a lot of this document. It has a lot more information than I'm sharing here. And there's 2 of them. Law enforcement agencies should develop programs that create opportunities for patrol officers to regularly interact with neighborhood residents, faith leaders, that's your churches, and business leaders. It's obvious that through Jade Helm and through this police task force, they want to create and establish policing in our neighborhoods, in our churches, in our communities. It's clear right there as an action item. The next action item, community policing, emphasizes working with neighborhood residents to co-produce public safety. That's your see something, say something, expanded on. Law enforcement agencies should work with community residents to identify problems and collaborate on impending solutions that produce meaningful results for the community. In other words, have the PD work with people to turn other people in the event that you need to do that. Because you work together, then you have the loving trust. Because Hitler's regime in the streets was for trust too, right? Or was it? Oh, the joys. Okay, moving on to 48. Not only are they going to be seen in our churches and our neighborhoods, but also in our schools. Law enforcement agencies should work with schools to encourage the use of alternative strategies that involve youth decision-making, such as restorative justice, youth courts, and peer interventions. Law enforcement should work with schools to adapt instructional approach to discipline that uses interventions or disciplinary consequences to help students develop new behavior skills, because they're the new daddy too. And positive strategies to avoid conflict, redirect injury, and refocus learning. A lot of it here. I mean, there is this whole section devoted to law enforcement, and I'm skimming some of these. But basically, they should also work with schools to develop and monitor school discipline policies with input and collaboration from school personnel, students, families, and community members. Imagine going to, your child-parent meeting at school, and you have your you have your teacher, you have the police officer that's advising him, and you have your counselor, because it's a community, right? Or is it? No, it's not a community. It's our children, and they sure the heck don't belong to any of those people. All right, so moving on to recommendation 5, but you get the idea. They obviously want to integrate everywhere. Now, if you read through this whole thing, I'm going to just state it again. There's lots of good stuff in here, good stuff. There's also a lot of questionable stuff. So pillar 5 is training and education. How are they going to get the training? And some of the things that they're recommending, this is on page 53 here. And basically they are talking about creating a kind of training hub, innovation training hub. Here it is. The Training Innovation Hub should establish partnerships with academic institutions to develop rigorous training practices, evaluation, and the development of curricula based on evidence-based practices. So here they're working on that, and they're also talking about working with this and as well as peace officer standards and training. So implementing a lot of training is just kind of the idea behind that action point. Moving on to the next one. Sorry if this is making you dizzy. Okay, officer wellness and safety. That's pretty much what that is. I didn't find a whole lot in that particular pillar, but that one's pretty self-explanatory. Finally, the entire thing concludes with implementation, how they're going to implement it. And it says the president should direct all federal law enforcement agencies to review the recommendations made by the Task Force of the 21st Century Policing and to the extent practicable to adopt those that can be implemented at federal law. So basically, let's go ahead and use the Department of Justice and all these things and explore partnership activities in order to get this thing moving. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Now, have they started implementing this? That's another question. Well, I'm going to take you to RAND Corporation. And here we are at rand.org, and it says, when it comes to police community relations, expect what you inspect. Acting on the recommendations of the recently released President Task Force of 21st Century Policing, that is the document that I just read to you guys, the report. But because of that report, they put this out. It will require a challenging mix of research, policy reform, and political capital. When considering their options, policymakers might find an old adage helpful. And it states, expect what you inspect. Basically, that means if you want to shape behavior, an effective way to do that is to measure it. Who's going to measure it? Well, our local PD. In hand with the government, because they're gaining our public trust. So then it goes on to talk about how for police and community relationships to improve, it talks about how the law enforcement across the U.S. need to be monitored so that progress can be made and recommendations can be tracked, and yada, yada. Also on collecting data and monitoring problematic behavior, both from the police agencies and who they have to deal with. So the reason that I want to show you this, there's some good stuff in here, but the reason I wanted to show it to you is because it is a direct implementation as a result of the Presidential Task Force on the 21st Century, that document I showed you. Now, here's another one put out by the RAND Corporation. And, you know, I can't stand the RAND Corporation. They are 100% Illuminati oriented. We all know that. This is why I'm showing it to you. There is an objective behind the RAND Corporation, and it is so much deeper than you even want to believe, or I even want to believe. I've done research on this corporation extensively and have some YouTube videos on it, but lots gets into this. Now, this particular one goes on to, in order to gain public trust, according to the document I showed you, they want police to start riding horses in our cities and towns because statistics show that the community will trust them better if they are on horses. Interesting, but definitely they want our trust. And you know, it's a good thing to have the trust of the police department. I get it to a point. It's just there is a lot of corruption in there, and that's because of the corrupt system, not necessarily because of corrupt officer. I know many police officers who are awesome men. They're awesome men. They know the Lord. There's good police officers. I also know some pretty crappy ones that do crap all the time and manipulate the system, but a lot of those ones are led to be that way because that is the way that the system teaches them to be. And obviously we have our good side of the cops, and I'm all for good cops, but there is a lot of corruption going on. Like everything, you have corruption in everything. And I think an easy place to have corruption is in the police department, which is why they have lost a lot of trust from the public, and they're trying to gain it back. But my question is, why are they trying to gain it back right now at the same time as the Jade Helm document, when they're doing military drills and whatnot? It's rather creepy. And what I mean by that is when we constantly have drills and stuff being held all across our land that haven't been done that way before, and we see more of a military presence, and they're stocking up our local PD with MRAPs, there is something going on. And that's what I want to do. I just basically want to put all the pieces together for you and say, hey, look, Jade Helm is getting it so the military, we can get used to the military in our streets, and they're getting in good relations with the community, and so is the police task force. They both have the same job. They both have the same goal. And the question can be asked or addressed, does this have something to do with some kind of event in the future? Now, with that being said, I want to play you a clip. And this is from Next News Network. I'm also going to leave the link to this below. But it basically shows, and I'm going to show you a photo as well, these FEMA camp roundups that they have started practicing for. And this one was out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's about a 2-minute clip, but I guarantee it'll be well worth it. Let me just play that.
FEMA camp roundup drills in Fort Lauderdale? Well, it is not a hoax. The Sun-Sentinel has reported, and now video has surfaced of Special Forces operations taking place under the cover of night in Broward County, Florida. The shocking video shows Black Hawk helicopters flying low and landing as Americans are marched single file through the city streets and then loaded into white vans taken to mock internment camps. Frightening video. Now, 200 military personnel from all 4 branches of the military took part in this coordinated drill, the locations of which were not disclosed to the public prior to the urban warfare training exercise. Now, the Sentinel is reporting that, quote, the goal is to prepare participants in realistic, unfamiliar training conditions before they deploy for combat overseas. However, concerned citizens are not buying it, and they believe there is a dual purpose for the action, and that is to train soldiers for real-life domestic martial law. Likewise, it's important to note that the Jade Helm exercises have recently labeled Texas and Utah as hostile territories in documents related to that exercise. Now let's flash back to 2009. The web was then ablaze with the revelation that the National Guard was hiring soldiers to become internment camp specialists.
Military Occupational Specialty, Internment Resettlement Specialist. The Army's Internment Resettlement Specialist plays an integral role in providing a uniform system of handling prisoners and detainees. First and always, these MPs are combat support soldiers, trained to fight. Then as internment resettlement specialists, trained to control and supervise detainees, to ensure humane treatment, and to assist them in returning to a productive life. For this job, you must qualify for a secret clearance.
All right, so there's kind of it. And let me just, I want to show you a photo. All right, real quick. This is the photo of them practicing in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, their FEMA drill roundup. And basically what they're doing is they're making them file in a single file and taking them in white vehicles, you know, once they walk them across here. They're basically practicing for FEMA roundup of dissidents. That's what that is. And that's what the video is referencing and talking about. That and this, let me show you another one where you have your black helicopters and stuff flying through the sky. Actually, this is probably a better photo of that. Anyhow, as you can see, there is something wild going on. They're practicing for FEMA camp drills in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. They've established Jade Helm. They want to get us used to people in the streets. Our police department in addition to that, are being prepped and ready to interact with the community in our schools, in our churches, in our businesses, in our public places. They're actually going to start holding events and things like that. So I can see this coming right soon, around the corner. It's March 2015 that document was put out, just a couple days ago. So we can start seeing drills from our police officers as well soon here. So get ready, folks. It is going down to hell in a handbasket. We're about to have not only Jade Helm, but we're about to get an uptick of police in our streets. Anyhow, I wanted to bring you the latest. This is Lisa Haven signing off.